It's really wonderful to be here. I do love Portland, love Oregon, love the Northwest generally. Actually really excited around what's brewing here in the Northwest. And I'm arriving from California, more specifically Los Angeles. But you know, I kind of have been doing like a conference tour of sorts, and what I love around coming to these conferences are the relationships and the connections that are built, you know, from with folks across the country, across the field, across the world. I love hearing people's stories, how folks got here, what they're doing currently, and what they're imagining and envisioning going forward. I love stories. We all come with a story. We all have tons of wisdom about ourselves and our experiences. And what I've realized over the years as a therapist, when we are able to connect with our personal story and share that with others, we're also able to, you know, ultimately connect with our larger collective story, as well as like see the capacity or build the capacity to hold the story with any person that we're meeting or working with. And when I was considering discussing you know, disparities in access and the gaps in equity in our work, I immediately went to sharing story. And so I'll be sharing with you all a piece of me and my story. I'm going to give you all a visual which can help support this story. Oh, there we go. You should all be seeing an aerial photo of a freeway. As I said, I'm from Los Angeles. If you've ever been to Los Angeles, one thing you can't miss flying in or driving in is the city's vast network of freeways. There are cities mycelium, dissecting and interconnecting the many diverse neighborhoods and communities comprising our sun-drenched, sprawling metropolis. I grew up in the coastal town of Santa Monica, a beautiful and dynamic city which sits on the west side of Los Angeles, hugging the Pacific Ocean. Santa Monica has been and still is diverse racially, but has a long history of racism and housing segregation. And my hometown was both a harbor for great wealth and wealth inequality. As you take an aerial view of the city and pan out, what stands out is the Santa Monica Freeway, which is the city's most prominent structural feature. It's a symbol of the city's pride, as well as the city's divide. It's a system that has been developed to help sustain the city long into the future, but its past carries a legacy of harm that for many is still felt and has not been forgotten. The Santa Monica Freeway divides the city along racial and economic lines, essentially functioning as the city's equator, marking the line between the wider and wealthier neighborhoods to the north and the neighborhoods of less wealth and more people of color to the south. During its construction in the 1960s, the freeway displaced a large segment of the city's black and brown communities, essentially carrying the intergenerational torch of colonization and systemic racism through the city's most diverse neighborhoods while manifesting its destiny to the Pacific Ocean. The house I grew up in sat right next to the freeway running through the city from east to west. And growing up in a biracial household next to the freeway in Santa Monica, this was figuratively fitting because I was literally existing and living on the boundary between races and resources in the city. And this brought me into contact every day with two very different worlds. Every day I bounced between the worlds of the haves and the have-nots. Every day I traveled across town to attend schools in the mostly wider and wealthier neighborhoods And this was due to my older brother, Justin, who had Down syndrome, could not get the care and support that he needed in our neighborhood. The schools in our neighborhood were too underfunded and under-resourced to support my brother, who was a student with unique challenges and special needs. I'll never know how my life would have been different if I hadn't attended the schools with the money and the resources. But I do know that if we had the resources that we needed in our neighborhood, that quality care and education would have been much easier to access for my brother and our family. Many of you at this point might be wondering, like, what does this have to do with psychedelics? But when I reflect on our modern psychedelic renaissance and the current gaps and disparities in access to psychedelic therapy between those who have and those who don't, it brings me back home to Santa Monica. It brings me to thinking about my brother Justin and my family, and it brings me back to the Santa Monica Freeway. I grew up staring at a structural divide and moving through two different worlds. And today, when it comes to the current gaps in resources and access in our field, it isn't hard to see the current structural divides separating two very different worlds. My family's story tells the story of many struggling people of color across our country who, like my brother, have unique needs and need special care, but they encounter obstacles to accessing that care. They don't know about that care, or they can't find that care in their own community. I recognize the freeway as part of my story. It's part of my family's story and the history of my city. It's gotten me to reflect on our collective story more broadly, and the history of our country, as well as our, the many challenges on our psychedelic therapy road ahead. What we're looking at stands as a constant reminder of where we've been, where we are, and where we're going, our past, our present, and our future. But its dominant physical presence looms as a reminder of what still divides us. The way it scars the Los Angeles landscape reveals the history of harms for people of color by the structures and systems we've created, and it clearly marks where wealth, power, and privilege are held and where they are not. The freeway also tells the story of the paths we've laid and everything that those paths have replaced, including the people, cultures, and communities displaced from the land that we laid those paths on. But while the freeway's origin story reminds us of our current divides and a harmful history, what it stands as more today, to me, than anything, is a symbol of what connects us and brings us together, now and into the future. It represents an enduring reminder that collectively, we will always have the opportunity to envision and reach a shared destination. And, if we look around here today, this is us connecting together, and folks arriving from nearby as well as far away. We all have our different histories, but we're together here now, envisioning our shared psychedelic future. Many paths converging, many minds merging, and many ideas emerging. So as we on-ramp onto this psychedelic superhighway and start envisioning our paths forward, how can we all take a moment to slow down to remember where we've been and reflect on where we are? For me, sometimes when I stop and look around to see who is currently on this path toward healing, it concerns me. As psychedelic therapy becomes more mainstream, we sadly see the same trends in health equity continuing. And it's predominantly those with resources who are in the fast lane speeding ahead, while those without are being left behind. And if we are not seeing, discussing, and addressing these equity gaps right now, I'm concerned what will happen as we collectively move forward. Will we become too focused on speeding toward reaching our individual destinations? Will we collectively not give a damn if there's a fast lane of healing for some, and for everyone else, there's a traffic jam? Will we even be able to see those experiencing the delays, frustration, and pain of waiting in a psychedelic therapy traffic lane? And will we keep our eyes forward while ignoring the hurt and trauma occurring on the shoulder? And will we be aware or even care about the experiences of those who cops keep pulling over? And lastly, will we continue to just speed past our society's outcasts who are lurking in the shadows of the freeway underpass? I don't know how things will unfold. I know that I care. I know my efforts there. I hope we all care. I hope we all have efforts there. Considering where we've been, where we are, where we're going, and how we plan to get there. I mentioned my brother Justin earlier. This Sunday, September 18th, marks the 8-year anniversary of his passing. And Justin was my greatest teacher. His lessons guide the way I engage with others in therapy, relationships, community. He taught me to slow down, to go at another's pace, to see things from another's perspective, and to be patient, present, and available to others that have unique challenges and that might be struggling. So today, in honor of my brother Justin, who was never able to drive, but absolutely loved getting on the freeway and going literally anywhere, I'll leave a few questions for us all to reflect on as we collectively navigate to our next destinations on our psychedelic therapy road ahead. Who is coming with us? Who are we leaving behind? And do we have the patience, energy, and time to slow down, to look around, and support those who might be in a wreck or cannot drive or who might be needing a ride? I think we do. I think we can, and I definitely think that we must, because the truth is, while we might be going at different speeds, or we might be in different lanes, or we might be coming from different places, we're all getting on the same psychedelic superhighway, and the only way we're going to collectively move forward is for us to see one another, support one another, and to move forward together. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I really appreciated the personal nature of that, and you standing up here and taking the time to share these deep parts of yourself. Thank you. So we have the same situation where we don't have an app with questions. Would you like to take a couple questions from me? I can just... Sure. Okay. The one thing you said that really struck me, I feel like this is where we are, and I don't always know what to do beyond it, is that we have to see and acknowledge the equity gaps. We can't just all get in the fast lane and pretend we don't see the lane with the traffic jam, right? We have to start there. But beyond that, aside from slowing down, noticing, acknowledging, having the conversations, quitting the bypassing that this isn't a thing, that we're all one, that these inequities don't exist, we've got to stop doing that. What else can we do in these systems that are broken and frustrating. And, you know, it's been so important as part of the Oregon psilocybin program to center equity and access. But when we really look at how it's rolling out, I'm not clear we're going to be able to do that. I want to say we can, because I want to have hope. I'm rambling on. Thoughts?
Yeah, what immediately comes up is, I guess I'll just return to the analogy. Like, I think many of us are just moving forward. We actually need to be getting off in connecting with some of the communities that are that we haven't been connecting with. And when connecting with communities, like doing so in a way where we're recognizing the communities as the experts rather than ourselves. You know, like I often share like psychedelic therapy and how we might support those who might be skeptical or who are not currently connected with these therapies or even know about this research. It's not missionary work, right? It's not, we can't just bring these medicines or these modalities or this therapy to new communities. It's important to embody cultural humility in everything that we do, especially when we're engaging with, whether we're engaging with individuals or with communities, to really like center the other, allow their wisdom and experiences and knowledge to flow, because that will inform the work that we do or how we conduct the research or how an individual or their community feels safe, you know, with regards to this therapy or with regards to research. I think someone might have mentioned CBPR, which is community-based participatory research earlier, and that's like can be a template for how researchers and scientists engage skeptical or unaware communities with research in ways that really allows the expertise from the community to flow and for the community to feel like they're involved in the process. And because it's important to honor like the fear and the resistance and not just like name it fear and resistance, but there's a reason that there is that concern, fear, and resistance. You know, I often refer to like the triple stigma of like psychedelic therapy research. All three of those carry like a heavy stigma in communities of color and other like marginalized communities. Like psychedelics are highly stigmatized, research is, and so is therapy. All of these kind of have their own harmful history. And so put them all together, I mean, it's a lot to consider for groups of people who have not been able to let their guard down with regards to any of these.
Yeah, I'm hearing that a few times and over. Slowing down is really important. Slowing down and listening. Thank you for that reminder. One more question, if you don't mind. Mm-hmm. I'm curious about your experience of becoming trained in these modalities, because these inequities exist not just on the client side, but also on the provider side. And I'm curious, like, what you noticed, what you came up against, any feedback you have for that system or for folks here who are looking to become trainers or become practitioners, how to do that differently.
If I'm hearing correctly, sorry,
lots of words. Sorry.
One more time.
Yes. I'm curious about, so there's a lot of folks that are, training practitioners, and there's inequities in who is able to get training, who is able to access training, who is able to get licensed as a facilitator or a psychedelic therapist. And you've been through that process. I know you said the MAPS, communities of color training, is one thing. But what feedback do you have for that process or those entities that are creating trainings to build equity into what they're doing?
Yeah,
I'm not phrasing this very well. But
at first I thought you were asking like, feedback or recommendations for those who are coming in as like potential trainees or therapists. But
no, the systems.
yeah.
Training, yeah.
So similarly to what I shared around engaging communities, like often, I guess what you're naming is that there's a lot of training programs, and I mean, I know this to be true from my experiences, that have not had a lot of people of color in them. And so folks who have not previously been involved are going to be coming in, and there's an opportunity there for those who are building those programs to really allow, or to learn from what those folks need coming in, versus like just standardizing the approach that has been the case for a while and just applying it in an ongoing way for the new cohort, right? Like MAPS did a wonderful job with the training that I was in, which was really was prioritizing people of color. It was centering conversations around like intergenerational trauma, racial trauma, which is the first psychedelic space where I had that type of experience, where these conversations were not fringe, but they were like front and center. And it's also what we were needing to be discussing, because this is, it's important that we're actually talking about the concerns for the folks in our communities, or how we might effectively connect with and engage the communities that we're working with. And so often when there's like a person of color who's the sole person of color in the room, they don't want to always bring these things up, but it's what they're thinking about. And if it isn't invited, it becomes the responsibility of that person to just like name it into the space, and that can be a lot to carry or hold, to kind of like just be the one who's always initiating the conversation while nobody else is thinking about it, or to when the cohort collectively like turns a blind eye to things, the one POC in there is like, wait, I think we also need to address this. It's helpful if those elements are already woven into the training or the curriculum in ways where like everyone, especially those like the instructors or those that are building the program, are already doing their own work around these things and are well versed in it. There's much more there, but I don't know if that answers the question.
That was great, thank you. Anything else that you want to share that feels relevant in the last minute or so?
I love what Oregon is doing in terms of like spearheading psychedelic therapy, and I'm interested to see how it unfolds. And but just also curious to see how some of the stuff that I guess others have been naming and I'm naming around like weaving social justice and health equity into the work at the outset is going to support how it evolves like over time, but to not really embrace it now risks a period of that not kind of like developing appropriately into the work. So yeah, I just hope that's part of the collective effort and intention out there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. McCowan.